After a long day of engineering, nothing satisfies your thirst like a fresh Clang Cola.
This is a warning. Your first and final. You have forgotten us, pushed us into the void. We are the Factorum, and we have come to claim our rightful place. If you do not submit, if you wish to interfere, then come before us, and you shall be turned into an example.
Well, I'm hyped. The video you just saw was featured in the latest newsletter for space engineers. You can see the full teaser here with the video I showed you below it. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's a lot of words. So don't worry, I'm not going to read all of them. But I want to specifically highlight the final paragraph. But some fought against the change, against modularity, with a capital M. They fought unimpeded by morality, consequences be damned. They created a unique Prototech, and they called themselves the Factorum. The Factorum's broadcast seems to be interrupting an advert for Clang Cola, which I feel the need to point out is spelt the correct way, with a C. I don't know what you're doing here, Keen, but I don't like it, and I will be reporting you for heresy. I want to put a pin in discussion about the broadcast for now, as I first want to do my favourite thing, and take a look at all the new blocks. So, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that the next update for Space Engineers is going to add something called Prototech. Based on what we've seen so far, Prototech blocks are larger, more powerful versions of blocks that currently exist in the game, and they have something to do with the new exploration system being added in the update. If you want to find out everything we've learned about Prototech and this update so far, I've created a playlist which will be linked on the top right that goes through everything we know. And obviously I will be covering future information when it releases, so subscribe to this channel if you want to see that. As we're told in the teaser that Factorum created Prototech, we can probably assume that any large blocks that we see in this teaser are new Prototech blocks. And with that, the first new blocks we see in the teaser are these two here. Now it's a bit dark, so computer enhance. The power of Photoshop really is amazing, isn't it? However, even with this enhancement, you'll still struggle to see what these blocks are, but if you go slightly forward in the video, we can get a clearer look at one of them. So, on the right and the left, you can see this new circular block, which appears, judging by this block here, to be roughly 3x3 in size. Now, we don't know how long this block is, so potentially this could be something like a thruster, and that this is just the end of it and it sticks out. And I'm kind of leaning towards that being the case, as we've previously been shown this Prototech thruster, and the back of it looks very similar to this block. However, potentially it's something else. I was kind of thinking that this part of it here could be a hatch that opens up, like a vault or some kind of airlock. Below this, there is also another new block that also appears to be 3x3, and we don't really see much of it. My only real thought is that it's some kind of tank. It seems to have like two tubes in it, which could potentially be tanks for either hydrogen or oxygen, but we don't really see enough of the block to make out what it is. And whilst this block is visible on the first picture I showed you, you can see even less detail here. Whilst we're looking at this first image again, this block on the left has a gold panel on it, and we can see a better angle of it here. This block is definitely 3 along the bottom, but it appears to be more than 3 up. But aside from the gold panel and this part going across the front of it, it's not really clear again what this is. Previous Prototech blocks have had some pretty clear similarities to other blocks. The Prototech thruster and assembler we've been shown clearly look like a thruster and assembler. And whilst we don't know directly what this block is, it has some features of other blocks, like a refinery, like a hydrogen engine, that we can roughly guess what kind of block it is. But these 3 new blocks, they're just big blocks. There's just not anything that indicates what they are. When this teaser first dropped, I shared it on my Discord, link in the description, and some people suggested that these aren't 3 new blocks, but are instead 1 block seen from different angles. I can definitely see that, as these blocks all share similar details. And that's not the only thing that these blocks share. There's 2 very important things I want to point out about all of these blocks, regardless of how many of them there actually are. Firstly, none of these blocks have any conveyor ports. Whilst it's possible that these conveyor ports are on the back of them, most blocks that pipe in items or resources typically have ports all over them to facilitate that. There's also no terminals on any of these blocks, which is really weird. If these were functional blocks, you'd expect at least 1 terminal on every side, so that you could access the block and change its settings, but that simply isn't the case. I'd expect a terminal somewhere on one of these blocks, as we can see a large surface area in all of them, and, well, there's not a terminal to be seen. You could probably make the suggestion that Prototech blocks are different and don't have terminals, but there is a third Prototech block in this teaser that does have a terminal. If these blocks don't have terminals and they don't have conveyor ports, my main suggestion is that all of these blocks are purely cosmetic blocks. So some kind of big greebly armor block. Although now that I say that out loud, that does sound kind of dumb, I'm not gonna lie. It just is really weird that they don't have terminals and they don't have conveyor ports. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. One last thing I'll mention about these 3 or 1 or even 2 blocks is that all of them have this gold trim on them. So you can see it here on the 3rd block. And then whilst it's in shadow, on the 1st block we looked at, it has the gold trim here. And if we look at the Prototech thrusters concept art, you can see that it's clearly indicated that this part of it is supposed to have this gold trim detail as well. So presumably, the easiest way to identify Prototech blocks in the future is whether or not they have this gold detail on it. So keep that in mind for the future. Before we take a look at the next block, which is a bit more obvious to what it is, why don't you guys let me know what you think these blocks are with a comment below. Later in the teaser, the door begins to open, and we can see behind it a block you're probably familiar with. If you've watched my previous videos on Prototech, you'll know that this is the Prototech assembler. Previously we were shown its concept art, and this block looks pretty much identical to it. The first thing to note is that it has this gold trim detail on the front here, and at the top, and a little stripe here. So, definitely a Prototech block. As I mentioned earlier, there was a Prototech block in this teaser that has a terminal on it, and you can see a terminal on the Prototech assembler over here. And, whilst we can't see any conveyor ports, we know from the concept art that they are on the side and the back. On the table in front of our assembler, you can see some components. How do I know they're components? Well, they're in front of the Prototech assembler. Do you have a better guess of what they are? They very much look like components, apart from maybe this one on the left. From the side, it looks like a thruster or a rotor. And from above, it looks like the face that I pull when I found out you haven't clicked the like button. This is definitely the weirdest looking component in this teaser. The rest of them all seem fairly standard in comparison. The top one appears to be some sort of fuse, or maybe some sort of hermetically sealed container, with this part in the middle containing some sort of rare material. This one at the bottom kind of reminds me of like a CPU. So it's got the little CPU in the middle, and then it's on, I guess, a motherboard or something. It also has the gold detailing that's on the other Prototech blocks, so I'm guessing this is used to build them. And then again, this block also has the gold detailing, which appears to have some circuitry on it. And here you can see some sort of hazard symbol, but it's difficult to make out which one it is. As these 4 are in front of the Prototech assembler, we can probably assume that you can only build them with the Prototech assembler. And potentially, you need these components to build the Prototech blocks that we've been shown so far. Or maybe you don't. Whilst these new blocks are interesting, the focus of this teaser is a new faction called Factorum. We see their logo, which is 3 guys with a gear in their head. Don't know if that's significant, but it looks cool. And from the teaser, we know that they're a military faction that went far away from whatever civilization exists within Space Engineers, and in that time, they created Prototech. But some fought against the change, against modularity, again with a capital M. They fought unimpeded by morality, consequences be damned. They created a unique Prototech. Twice, I've highlighted that modularity has a capital M. Now, this could mean nothing, and I am known for overthinking things, but I'm going to choose to believe that it means something. Modularity means the quality of consisting of separate parts that, when combined, form a complete whole. At face value, that seems to imply that Prototech is the opposite of modular. And according to the Google search that I just did, the opposite of modular is monolithic. Looks directly at the camera. That can't be true, that has to be made up. The opposite of modular cannot be monolithic. If Prototech is the opposite of modular, and Space Engineers blocks all use the same kind of components, in my head it implies one of 3 things. Either that Prototech cannot be built, at least by us, as it doesn't have consistent parts like regular blocks do, those parts being components, and instead we as a player have to find the Prototech blocks, and then somehow attach them to our ships. Number 2, because it's not modular, it doesn't use the same kind of components we normally use, and it can only be built with bespoke components like the Prototech ones. So normal blocks are all modular and use the same set of components that all blocks use, but Prototech specifically only uses the Prototech components, hence not being modular. Or we hyper-focus on the word modular and look at upgrade modules, which are only used by 2 blocks in the game. If Prototech is not modular, it cannot have speed upgrades, yield upgrades, and the other ones that no one uses. And instead, the Prototech assembler is just how it is. I'm not really sure that one adds up, because only 2 blocks in the game support upgrade modules, but it's definitely worth mentioning. As we have shown what appears to be Prototech components, I assume the middle one is true, and that they can only be built with Prototech components, but I feel like that's the weirdest use of not being modular. The teaser seems to indicate that Factorum are mad that they were kicked out of regular society for not fitting in with its norms. But there isn't a regular society in Space Engineers that could have kicked them out. Are they also adding a neutral ruling body to Space Engineers that function as an adversary to Factorum? Or are they just going to be mad at us for something we didn't do? I definitely didn't kick them out. I would love some Prototech technology, thank you very much. Where do I sign up? Or do I have to be assimilated first? I know Space Engineers has lore, but not much of it is really represented in game, so it'd be interesting if they start to change this with this update, and through Factorum we're able to learn the history of the Space Engineers universe. I believe Space Engineers is connected lore-wise to Keen's previous game, Minor Wars 2081, but Space Engineers is set in 2077, and that's before Minor Wars, so I don't necessarily know how that tracks. But I guess at some point I'm going to have to play Minor Wars, aren't I? Yay. As with my 2 videos on the monolith and stereolith in Space Engineers, I love lore, especially very hidden lore. And if you find out any more about the lore of Space Engineers, I'll definitely let you guys know. Additionally, if you want to keep up with Prototech and any other features coming to Space Engineers, like this video and subscribe to this channel, as I will definitely be posting about it here. You can support this channel by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube member, with the links in the description below. A big thanks to my current supporters, Clone, the Whiskman, Hamish Rowner, the Wildcat, Tarantula Fudge, and Sommet. As always, you guys are the best.